video, I'll provide an overview of TIBCO Cloud Integration when used for solving application integration scenarios. Now, TCI is a leading iPaaS that has various capabilities all in a single product. These capabilities help solve different use cases for common integration scenarios and patterns. So let's look at an event-driven application integration use case, pairing TCI Connect and TCI Develop capabilities for use by a non-developer, maybe a business analyst or admin. Let's get into this. So first we have TCI Connect, which is powered by Scribe. The key concepts for Scribe is that you'll have solutions which contain maps, which are really a visual representation of your mapping logic, really your instructions for what the integration should carry out. Now, a map's going to combine a number of things, mainly connections. So connections to your different SaaS apps, databases, files, etc. The blocks that you use to visually describe are methods or really actions on those connections, or it's more of a control block like a loop or a conditional if else. So a solution can have any number of maps and you could have any number of solutions. Scribe is great for batch processing and schedule jobs and file imports and exports. Now we have TCI Develop, which is powered by open source project Flogo. The key concepts of Flogo is that you still have an app, which is similar to a solution, which has any number of flows in it. And inside of a flow, you can have triggers. This is how you would receive data from external sources. That trigger is there to take that data source input using some kind of underlying protocol and be able to send it to a handler. And that handler now dispatches those events to your mapping logic used in actions, which are similar to blocks. Those actions then can call out different methods to APIs, data stores, etc., all with kind of a common interface. So TCI Develop is great for processing events in real time. An event could really be anything from a SaaS webhook to a custom callout, a service bus or message queue, message from IoT, anything sent to Flogo's connectors or a protocol like HTTP can be processed in context. So as we look at the two capabilities with Scribe and Flogo, we'll see that they really shine in their own areas, but you might say that you'd like to combine these different types of patterns. So as I mentioned before, Scribe is good at those recurring processes, looking for net change on databases and APIs, something that's usually scheduled, processing large data in batches. Whereas Flogo use cases, when you want to process events, it could be for building microservices, for capturing webhooks, for actually developing a function as a service or processing streams even. So these two capabilities often overlap, and these two capabilities for the patterns that you're looking to solve can be interconnected using product-specific capabilities over REST. So really, for a lot of the common iPaaS scenarios, you might use Scribe, but you might also want to extend it with Flogo. So we're going to take a look at that demonstration today. The other types of use cases, very specifically is Flogo has a number of connectors that you can use for capturing these types of events. So Microsoft Azure Service Bus, you can capture any kind of a message on the service bus, translate that into other actions and call out to other connectors on TIBCO Cloud Integration. I can do the same thing for Salesforce. I can capture platform events. I can, even if I don't have a connector, I can set up generic HTTP endpoints to capture other SaaS application events, webhooks. I could also be configuring a webhook endpoint on Flogo to really act as a function as a service, to do that quick translation of data. Common use case there is In any front office, back office integration, you might be dealing with address information, and standardizing that address information would be a common use case, whether you're processing accounts, customers, vendors, any kind of a transaction, an invoice or an order. Having that right formatted address is important. So why not build one service that solves that use case with an input of all your data fields like line 1, zip, etc., and an output of it. You can also use Flogo to create a server-side implementation of a REST endpoint. If you're familiar with the Scribe REST Web Services connector, you can consume APIs by loading in a Swagger specification. Flogo can load a Swagger specification and create that server-side deployment of it. So if you build out your own API, you can use our API modeler and import it into Flogo and Scribe and have that Swagger specification really be your contract for each of those. So having Flogo really talk to your backend services and events and creating events and streams, you could have Flogo front-end a web service that you could have Scribe and other consumers call. The last use case we want to talk through is that Flogo also has the concept of extensions, or really these could be thought of even as custom connectors, which will help you create your own triggers and your own activities. So for the use case today, let's look at a little bit of a joint use case between Scribe and Flogo. So what we'll do is we'll have a listener in the Microsoft Dynamics CRM product that is publishing to the Azure Service Bus. Then we'll have Flogo listening to that service bus for the events that are occurring in Microsoft Dynamics. And what we'll be able to do is process that event and determine what we want to do with it. In some cases, we'll get an event that we would like to forward on to Scribe or TCI Connect so that we can maybe process its data in other data sources. Maybe we want to send it to Scribe for our Scribe users, our citizen integrators to process. Or maybe we want to keep all of our execution history in Scribe. Maybe we've already been using Scribe heavily. So there's a number of ways that we can interconnect these. What I'll look at today is using the Scribe request reply service to take in a request and respond to Flogo. But just note that you can use any kind of common communications like a queue, or you could use a database, etc. So in the TIBCO Cloud, I'll have multi-tenant access to my subscription. So if I wanted to create production integrations, but also set up other environments for my developers or my QA, I can easily toggle between those environments on the TIBCO Cloud. Additionally, I can have my integration set up in multiple regions. So I can choose my region for where I want to be, including Microsoft Azure. Within TIBCO Cloud Integration, we'll see the 3 components that are available. Let's take a look at our Flogo components first. Within Flogo, I'll get a list of all of my Flogo apps that I have created. So remember, an app is going to contain multiple flows. And a lot of these flows could have multiple flows, meaning they have multiple different types of triggers. So let's get into this flow. So inside of this app, I'll be able to see that I have one kind of trigger here. It's for the Azure Service Bus. And I also have another flow here, which we'll get into in a moment, which is a subflow. So inside of Flogo, I'm going to be able to create really a number of triggers on the left that I would like to listen for or trigger the flow when triggered. then I'll be able to map them into my logic over here. So high level, we'll have triggers. So one, I already have set up an Azure Service Bus trigger. So I'm using an existing connection that I've created in TCI. And really, I've just gone in here and I've configured the name of the queue. And normally on any kind of a trigger, you'll have some kind of configuration for any domain specific use cases. So for example, in a service bus, I might want to make a peak. I might want to hold on to this message while I'm processing it, and then determine later in my flow what I want to do with that message. Or I could say, hey, this is a destructive read. I'm going to pick it up, and then no matter what, I'm going to process it. Even if I fail along the way, it'll be my job to put that message back in a queue for a retry. Like I said, any of these triggers, I could have multiple triggers if I wanted to on the same flow. And to give you a better idea of triggers is these could be from other clouds like from Salesforce to Azure. It could be a generic HTTP message. It could be from Lambda, etc. It could even be a time frame. Now I can add multiple triggers here on the left. So this could be waiting for data to be sent to me, or it could say in every few minutes or every hour that I'd like to reprocess that data. So as my data comes into the flow from whatever has triggered it, what I'll normally do is I'll just log a message. It'll help me for troubleshooting along the way. Then you'll see I have varying branches to my other action blocks. So these branches will allow me to go and determine if there's a specific condition that I would want to go down and call another set of actions. So through here, I'll always log a message. I'll always parse the JSON. But then based on a condition that the message is of type create and the primary entity name is of a contact, we'll actually go down here and we're going to make a scribe call. So these conditional actions, I can always run them if I wanted to. Say, hey, always run this branch. Or maybe specifically on an error, I'll go down another branch. So we talked about the peak on the queue or the destructive read. Maybe on an error, I'll call an action to put a message back into the queue. So actions are these types of blocks here. So let's look at two blocks right now. This action is called parse JSON. It takes an input of JSON data. The only thing that I need to send in here is the message that I got from Azure Service Bus. So remember, Azure Service Bus, it's a generic technology. So all I needed to do here was map the string of JSON from the service bus to this parser. I'll actually just paste in what I got in that message. So within Azure, I could actually go in, find the JSON, just paste it in here, and it'll give me a nice output of that object so that I can map it, just like field mappings for later. In other connectors, you may or may not need to do this. So Salesforce, for example, there's no parsing needed. The Salesforce connector would know what your metadata is and know what all the fields are already. Other connectors, you'll paste in those sample JSONs along the way. Next, as we go down the branch, if it is a create and it's a contact, we're going to go in this action over here. It's a REST call. So we've determined the method. We've determined where it needs to go. It's going to go to Scribe. It's going to be JSON. And there'll be other tabs over here to help you make that call. So as I call that Scribe request reply map, I know that I'm going to send some body. I've just gone in here and pasted the JSON that I want to send to Scribe. I'll map that JSON in. So those are the fields that you just saw previously. And what I've done is I've just pulled out the field mappings from what's in scope already. So I know that I have the flow, what the flow sent me, which is really just some raw JSON. And I've parsed it out with this parse JSON activity. So I can get a nice just key that I want to send over as the business unit. There's other settings here as well. I know Scribe's going to return to me with this response, and thus far I've only configured a success of a bool here. The other activity that I have is what we call a start a subflow. And you saw inside of my app, I have two flows. One is the one we're looking at. The other here is the log contacts. So what this start a subflow activity does is I can go and call another flow that maybe does or does not have any triggers. I can have that flow do some processing and return data for me. Pretty common scenario with the address solution that I talked about earlier. If you want to do some management on addresses, you can have one flow that can be called from any of your other flows within that app. So the only other thing here that we should look at is the activities. So there are a number of connectors and protocols available within inside of TIBCO Flogo. So these can be your SaaS applications. It could be custom extensions from the community. There's over 800 extensions out there. It could be a generic REST call that we can configure, as well as a number of the other connectors that are available, both to third parties as well as other TIBCO applications such as live apps. So this flow is ready to go. There's also some other capabilities that you should definitely take a look at as far as testing flows. I can send test data in, test trigger data, and watch what happens throughout the flow. I can also customize a specific flow for this when there is an error, so that I can have some idea for what I generically want to do if any one of these blocks fails, so that I'm not creating conditional statements all throughout the way. Once I save this and push this, we'll have this app that is available in the cloud. So I'll have some other controls up top here for what I might need to do. So one main use case for Flogo, as you're processing events, we'll give you a metrics tab to share with you how much resources you're using. And you might find that you're getting a lot of events, a lot of messages. You might need to scale up the resources to add really another instance of that application. Be able to very easily just do that here from the user interface, or I could do this from CLI. Basically what that means is I'll just use another application from my subscription to scale this thing out. Can also go through and find logging in here. You'll notice that I could have done a test of that flow previously. I can also come in here, return some logging. I'll actually see some of the out-of-the-box logging for really the core engine, but you saw the log activity. I can put anything I want in this log here. So anything for troubleshooting that I might want. And then lastly, there are a number of areas within that flow where I could really have a dynamic variable or an application variable. So that could be things like the endpoint for your Scribe request reply. If I put that out here, I can have any number of my flows just swap over to a new endpoint as I change that. So let's head back over. We have an endpoint here that is going to be capturing events from the service bus. Now again, if you'd like to set that up on your service bus, we'll provide some documentation with this video. There is a easy copy-paste PowerShell script from Microsoft to get what's called the plugin registration tool. So I can go into my Dynamics instance, connect with that, create a step, and that would allow me to say, all right, on create or on update or on delete or any number of those types of actions, plus an entity like a contact or account opportunity, we want to trigger off an action and send it to our service bus. Now inside of Flogo, we made a RESTful call to our Scribe environment. So that Scribe environment, it was secured from some tokens that I'll pass through with Flogo. Inside of Scribe now we have solutions. These are just like your Flogo apps. Inside of a solution is any number of maps, just like flows. And inside of these maps, we'll see the visual representation of what this activity is doing. So this user interface is kind of built more towards the citizen integrator. So we have the blocks on the left to help abstract really how to work with these different types of APIs. We can add in any connection here that we have an existing connection to, and we can pull out these blocks here for the actions. So this block here is going to be waiting for Flogo to call us. That's how it will call us. The request will be the inputs. You saw I had all these inputs here on the Flogo side. What I'll do is maybe I'll call out to a connector that I like using with Scribe, or maybe it's on-premise and I want to use the on-premise agent. Any number of reasons why you might want to process it in this capability. And then I'll determine what I want to send back to Flogo, whether I can tell it, hey, it worked, hey, it didn't work, so that Flogo can really just process that event end to end. So if you're thinking about using two capabilities, that's great. If you wanted to process all your data within Scribe and wanted Flogo to process your events, just send it back things so that it would know, hey, I processed the event, I can forget about that message. Or there was a failure, I can put it somewhere else to store it off to reprocess later. So inside of these blocks here, you can see this is the same stuff that we sent back in the Flogo output. We'll say hard-coded this to be true if it's true, false if it's false. So to summarize, Flogo, it's powered by our open source project Flogo, TCI Develop Router. TCI Connect is powered by Scribe. These are all together, it's one product. It's all included in the TCI subscriptions, and you can really interoperate these two capabilities together to get any type of integration pattern solved for a variety of different user personas. Thanks for watching.